Hi everyone, and welcome to our second Facebook Live this October, celebrating Black History Month. My name's Uman, and I'm the Inclusion and Diversity Coordinator here at the RPS. And I'm really pleased to be co-chairing this Facebook Live with Martin from the UK Black Pharmacists Association. So the focus of this Facebook Live is to discuss how we can improve progression, visibility and representation for Black pharmacists. And I will now hand over to Martin to introduce our panel and to chair the rest of the session. Martin, you're on, yeah.
Hi guys, I'm Martin. I'm a board member of the UK Black Pharmacists Association. I'll be here with four of our wonderful guests, panel members, whatever you like to call them. We've got Charles here, who is a lead GP practice pharmacist. We've got Louise Brown, who is a top academia pharmacist at the UCL. We have Raliat, who is one of the best hospital pharmacists we've ever known, one of the top hospital pharmacists. And then we have Noel Steele, who is a provisionally registered pharmacist, who I know is doing fantastic and is, I think, one of the best provisionally registered pharmacists right now. So now I'll pass you on. We have a few questions which we'll be asking our panel members. I think the first question I would like to ask our panel members, and anyone can take the question, would be, what do you think are the barriers to progression of Black pharmacists, and what needs to be done to remove them? And any of our panel members, please feel free to take the question.
I'll take this one. So first and foremost, actually, I'd like to thank the RPS for organising and providing the platform for us to have this conversation. I think that's really important, and so I highly commend that. Obviously, it's going to be difficult to answer these questions in 2 minutes. We can't elaborate. However, I'll try my best. So in terms of the barriers in progression, if I could answer this question in its simplest form, I would say lack of diversity. But of course, there's more to it. Unconscious and sometimes conscious bias plays into it. But they are at the root of every inequality, and bias set the rules a long time ago, which created the bottleneck, resulting in a lack of diversity, which continue to auto-catalyze the lack of diversity. Now, I'd love to elaborate, but obviously time is of the essence. But if I could shed some light on some of the things that I think personally, in my opinion, are important. One being the lack of opportunity or knowledge of the opportunity, greater scrutiny, where it be perceived or actual. So often leaders that don't match the status quo are often more scrutinized. And not to mention, of course, circumstances. So for example, someone like myself, who is the primary earner for my mother and my siblings, and who has financial responsibilities for a lot of family members back home. Money, unfortunately, I don't have the privilege to say that money isn't important, because it is. And so even then, even when all the right boxes are ticked, there's the will I fit in, which is a big thing, because the higher up the ladder, the lonelier it gets, unfortunately. And when you are the only person, when you are the odd one out of that lonely bunch, it can be, a bit more scary, to say the least. And positive discrimination, I think, as a solution, is one of the ways of removing some of the barriers. After all, diversity is part of the problem, then it's a start in the right direction. Of course, there are solutions that I imagine will be perhaps more effective, but these are too detailed for me to explain in the 2 minutes that I have to answer this question. But I hope that's sort of shed some light or provoked some thought. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for doing that, Noel. And just to expand, pretty much, can you just, so the viewers don't know, can you just tell us a bit about yourself? And I know you have pretty much just elaborated on your background, talking about how you were the sole earner, but just tell us about your journey of how you studied pharmacy and how you became a provisionally registered pharmacist, just so that the viewers know who you are.
Yeah, sure. So for me, unfortunately, I don't have that romantic, I fell in love with it a long time ago type of story. But I have always loved healthcare. My whole, my mum and we've got sort of a big caring background. And so, I've always loved healthcare. I've always liked the sciences, and I like to talk to people. So for me, this was a perfect amalgamation. A friend actually recommended pharmacy to me in my second year of A-levels. And that's when I actually started looking into it, and I realized actually there's a lot more to it than what people know. And I think that's one thing we need to do, is blowing our own trumpets in pharmacy, because we don't do that enough. So when I actually started looking into it, I was like, okay, this is really interesting. I could dig this. And so I went into it. I studied at Huddersfield University, an amazing university, perfect for me, not too big, not too small, allowed me to sort of keep my head down and continue going. There were difficulties, obviously, along the journey, but I made it through. And now I've graduated. I am the third person in our generation, in my family here in the UK, to graduate. But of course, there were challenges. For example, when I first started university, my older brother was also at university. He's my cousin, but I call him my older brother. He was also at university, but he was one of the first to go there. So for us, we didn't really know what the barriers were. We didn't know what to do or how to go about being university students. And so for us, things like applying for what do you call it? I forgot what it's called, student finance. All of that was sort of a bit of a challenge. And I think that's one of the things that looking back, I wish I'd have known more about. It's just sort of the logistics, and without having anyone else in the family who's been through that, it does sort of create a bit of a challenge. And throughout university, I also found it a little bit more difficult because, as I mentioned, I am the sole earner, and not in the sense that that in the sense that I provide for the family, or whilst my mum's also providing for the family. So my mum worked tirelessly, 7 days a week, sometimes full 12-hour shifts. She was a healthcare assistant at the hospital here in Leeds. And, when I saw that, I just couldn't sit by, you know what I mean? I couldn't sit by, especially as the oldest of her children. And so, throughout university, I started 2 businesses. I worked, I think I calculated the other day, 11 jobs in the 5 years that I was at uni. Obviously, sometimes I'd start a job, I realized it wouldn't match up with my curriculum and whatnot, so I'd leave. The businesses, unfortunately, they were really, really good, and I had one of the, some really good potential to earn some good money. But, I chose my passion. I chose pharmacy because for me, it's also provided that security of, longevity. And I don't look back. I don't look back. It was fun. Obviously, one of my other businesses failed because I couldn't pay enough attention to it. But it was fun. And now I'm here. I just want to sort of explore the profession and also give back, if anything, to people like myself who find themselves in that decision where we have limited options or choice. So for me, I'm looking to start off another youth thing, and I'm also advocating for higher education in my own community, because we've got a lot of, especially the young children with asylum seeker parents. They don't know what's going on, and so I'm usually the one who says, okay, this is what options you need to be doing in your GCSEs and all of this, sort of guiding them through it. We've had 1 or 2 graduates. I think it was two now, actually. I don't know if they graduated formally this year. So that have sort of helped through the journey, and I'm quite proud of them. So if you're watching, good job.
Well done, man. Honestly, you've done so much in a short space of time of starting your career. And I feel, in essence, we all share that journey where some way or how we've all become individuals who've had to be the sole earner or maybe the first to go to university. So well done, I commend you for that. I'm just going to move on to the next question now. And like I said, feel free no, you've already answered one of the questions. But the next question I'm going to go on to would be, why don't individuals feel safe in raising concerns and experiences of discrimination? And what do employers and organizations need to do to improve this? And I would also like to ask our panel members, before you actually answer that question, please, introduce yourself and tell us a bit about yourself and your journey to becoming a pharmacist that you are, whether you're in a GP, whether you're in a hospital, or whether you're in academia. So please, I leave the floor for any of you guys.
Shall I start?
Look for it, brilliant.
I'm just going to go back very quickly before I introduce myself to your previous question, because I'd like us to think about the issue slightly different, the issue of diversity slightly different, because actually within pharmacy, within the UK, I don't think we do have a diversity issue. We have a representation problem, especially at senior levels, most especially at senior levels. But actually, and Louise, you're here, so you might. My understanding is that UCL School of Pharmacy is the most diverse university, definitely in London and possibly in the country. However, that's when you consider all Black and minority ethnic people, not Black. Our pharmacy is actually a very, very significantly diverse profession. but we do not have the appropriate representation at the appropriate levels. And so I think we have a representation problem, and we also have, for want of a better word, an inclusion or together problem in terms of us and the diverseness of us, our diversity, and us us actually including each other in the profession. Because I think there are lots of other healthcare professions that have got serious diversity issues. That I don't think that's our problem. Our problem is representation, and it's inclusion at the especially at senior levels. But just to so now just very briefly about myself. So I'm, as I said, I'm chief pharmacist at Barts Health NHS Trust, which is in North East London. In contrast to Noel, I fell in love with pharmacy, specifically clinical pharmacy, about 40 years ago when I was thinking about which course I was going to study at university. And I actually studied at university in Nigeria, and then moved to England after I finished my course, and then basically worked my way up in hospital pharmacy and as a clinical pharmacy specialist, and then services manager for many years. And I spent just all of my time working in London. I would say that in terms of why people don't feel safe to raise concerns, a lot of it is because of actually the reaction that people will get because of the reactions that people have when you call out racism and discrimination. It's a very, very, very difficult thing for people to accept. And there's that well-known saying that we all know that there's racism. Everybody accepts there's racism. Nobody will admit to being a racist. And so when nobody admits to being a racist, how are you as a person going to say, well, actually, I think I'm going to I've experienced racism and call it out? Because your reaction is just not going to be good. The reaction that you get from those structures and from those organizations is difficult. So what employees need to do really is to create those safe spaces, as well as to encourage the dialogue so that people feel comfortable about raising it, and that they understand that this is something which, from an organizational point of view, then actually it's different, but it's not special in terms of the way that people are treated and the way that people behave and the way that organizations should manage it. You just need to think about what your structures are around it. And until it becomes accepted that this is something that we should talk about, and that we can describe, and that non-Black and non-minority ethnic people are comfortable with discussing, then Black people are not going to feel comfortable with discussing with them, because of the reaction that you're going to get when you even start to think about it. So this is a thing for me about allyship.
Yeah.
Actually, once people start to realize it's something that we need to deal with, and they accept that it's not personal to them, it's an issue and we need to deal with it, then I think it's going to be very difficult for people to be able to call that out. So it's about creating that culture and that safe space.
Okay, so in essence, you're pretty much saying we should just have those difficult questions and educate, not just ourselves, but people who are from the non-Black and ethnic minority background.
Yes, and it's not our job to educate people, but however, we do need to take responsibility for making sure that the message gets through, and that things are done, and that we raise the issues. But everybody needs to educate themselves and feel comfortable with themselves discussing this problem. It's such a taboo subject.
Yeah, it's pretty much
that taboo. Then
it is, yes, it's pretty much in Harry Potter where you shouldn't say his name Voldemort. Yeah. That's the example I could pretty much compare it to. So I understand where you're coming from completely, Rania, and what you said is amazing, and you pretty much hit the nail. Can't fault anything you said, to be honest with you. And do you feel there's any more you would like to share, or
about
to add to it?
About myself, or just about this subject?
Subject in general, really.
No, cede the floor to some of the other panelists.
Cool.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to move on to the next question. But if our panel members, want to add to what Raleigh said, please, by all means, do not hesitate to do so. The next question would be, when considering improving visibility and representation, what factors do we need to take into account? And as well as this question, please introduce yourself and let the people who have been watching know who you are, and let the people who have just entered know who you are. So please, go ahead.
Hi, Martin. Maybe I should jump in and also to respond to your previous speakers. Thanks very much for having me. So my name's Louise Brown. I'm a Principal Teaching Fellow in Pharmacy Practice at UCL School of Pharmacy. I originated as a community pharmacist. My elder sister was a pharmacist, so it was really clear that this is probably what I'm going to be doing as well. So there you go. And I worked all over central London, and I worked for Boots when I first started. And a long time ago, because I'm pretty old, I got the opportunity to be what's called a teacher practitioner. So I had a split post, and I taught part of the week at King's College Uni and part of the week doing pre-reg training back a long time ago. And I was probably the first black teacher practitioner that they'd ever had within Boots, and probably within any other organisation. And it was, I've got to say, it wasn't always an easy journey. That point that Raleigh made about representation, it's very hard when you start doing something like this and you're standing in a room of 30, maybe pharmacists, and you're the only black person in the room and they're waiting to be trained or taught something. You really have to pull on your inner resources to say, I belong here, I can do this, I have the skills, I can smash this, I can, this is what I'm here for and this is what I can do. And somehow I've kind of clawed my way through a career into academia. So now I'm full-time at UCL School of Pharmacy, and I lead the team of teaching focused academics who work on the pharmacy practice elements of the MPharm. I think you're completely right about representation and visibility. So a couple of things, I suppose, to spin in. So yeah, at UCL SOP, we're really lucky. We have quite a diverse group of undergraduate students, which is brilliant. But in terms of leadership within, I can speak for academia and within a lot of other organisations, it's not there. And sometimes the things that you need to change within an organisation to make it more inclusive, to make sure that you actually have equity, to make sure that people succeed because of what they can do and not because of who they are, you need to be in a leadership position to make the kind of decisions that can affect that change. And that's what's really hard, I think, in a lot of pharmacy organisations. And I suppose not just within pharmacy, you've got a big groundswell of people coming through from school into the profession who are a very diverse community. But what's difficult is getting to the top where you can really make a difference. So that representation, and I think really you call it visibility, is really hard. What would I say? I think if you're lucky enough to be in a position where you have some leadership responsibilities for things like recruitment, for things like creating policy, for things like being at meetings with the top people and challenging what people are saying or doing or decisions they're making, that's the time where you really can make the most difference. I think the whole way through your career, by doing what you're doing and being visible, you don't realise. So even for you guys who are at the start, you're waiting to do your pre-reg exam, which I hope comes soon for you, it was really heartening to hear what Noel's doing looking back. So the fact that you're there doing it and being successful at it is huge. But the further up that you go, the more that you can do. I think people struggle with challenging or speaking up about concerns they have over how they're being treated, because you can feel very vulnerable, particularly if there's only a few of you in that organisation. It feels scary. Like you say, nobody wants to be seen as a racist. And I think sometimes as well, people don't always know what racism looks like. What I mean by that, so it's things like you're selecting some people to go to a conference to represent a department within a university, say, and maybe this is abroad, and you think about who would be good people to go, and maybe you've got an idea in your head of what that looks like. It looks like this kind of person. It looks like, rather than actually, what is the strength within the team? Who's actually been doing the work? Who actually can articulate it in the best way? And so a big part of it is, if you are at those tables and challenging that, actually, why have we selected this person? Or we always select this person. Why haven't we thought about that person? And creating, a safe space where people can say, what I do have a lot, unfortunately, sometimes is students coming to me privately saying where they're struggling, and you know, you try to do your best to support them as much as you can. But yeah, so that's pretty much me. I'll hand over to maybe Charles if you want to jump in.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thanks for inviting me onto the panel. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Charles Adiase. I'm a Nigerian British pharmacist. I am a consultant pharmacist in primary care and diabetes at the Coram GP Federation in Hertfordshire. I started my journey in Bradford. I did my college in Bradford, did my MPharm degree at Bradford University. I had a lot of support along the way, which was quite good. When I decided to come into general practice, I decided that while in university, but I think like most people, you struggle to find people that actually look like you or have done what you've done to actually inspire you. So you have to find inspiration from somewhere. So fortunately for me, I'm one of 5 brothers, and all my brothers are quite successful. So I use them as a means of pushing myself forward. So I started at community pharmacy, did my technician training, just like Noel, did multiple jobs, paid my way through university and everything else. Went to hospital, worked at the CCG, then decided to pay my way through my specialist training, which what Noel said is quite very important, because I think it's quite difficult to pick between making money when a lot of people depend on you and actually building a career. And part of leadership is about recognizing that leadership doesn't always mean more money, but it definitely does mean more responsibility. So you're always faced to between those 2 choices. So unfortunately for me, I was able to make the choice, pay my way through my specialist training, did my master's in diabetes, did a master's in clinical pharmacy, did a postgraduate diploma in advanced practice in urgent primary care. So I worked my way through the processes and got my experience, and now got my job. I think for me, the important thing is thinking about the barriers. Is that I agree that there's diversity, but I think that there is I think as time changes, we need to understand the definition for things, because diversity is simply saying Africa is very populated, India is very populated, America rules the world. You know, you have a lot of people that look a certain way, but they don't have the power to impact change. So the moment you go into a room and you talk about diversity, people knock you on the head by saying, we're diverse. And then you're struggling because yes, in number, in population size, yes, you are a lot. But a lot of you in one small place doesn't mean that you actually have impact on anything. When we speak about diversity now, it has a new meaning. Diversity is heterogeneity, making sure that everything and everywhere, at every level, there's heterogeneity. There's that spread across. And I think when we say diversity, that's what we're trying to make. But I totally agree. I think it's about visibility and representation, and that's the place to start from. I think the other thing to think about is the Black construct, and I think Noah and other panel members have alluded to it, is that often, as a Black person, you're often either migrated or born into a certain background, which other ethnic groups actually experience as well. And you're framed into the mindset of, you need to do this, you're responsible for your family, you're responsible for this. You don't really have the, what they refer to as a mirror model to actually guide you to your pathway, to say, this is the pathway to where you need to become a leader, to become influential, to actually change, create change. And because of that, you don't actually have that construct in your life. So you now have a new construct that's been put on you by society, and a construct that's framed the way you think about how your career should look like. You know, I've spoken to a lot of pharmacist colleagues and friends that have said, oh, I'm not going to apply for an area manager job because it's the same money as being a shop manager. But that's true, but being an area manager is a powerful position. And so, but that's the construct we've created for ourselves, unconsciously and consciously. So I think things like that are the reasons why we have barriers, as everybody said, we fear of rejection and so on. I think in terms of thinking about why people don't report, I think there's a big element in there. One of the things that I've experienced for myself as well, and friends around, is the fear of being called a victim. Nobody enjoys being called a victim. And once you are identified with the victim mentality, it cripples you, because, you know, if you're someone that stands for integrity, you believe in what you believe in, then, you know, you really don't want to be labeled as a victim. I have a friend I spoke to that overheard a nurse that couldn't take blood from a patient, described the patient as, oh, it's just difficult to take blood because she's Black and big. And I'm thinking, what does that skin color have to do with taking the blood? You know, it's this kind of thing. But she didn't actually, but she just felt there's no need to actually create any unnecessary discomfort between me and this nurse now and so on. And it's those things that we keep having on because we're afraid, as we earlier said, to address these issues. Because we're afraid of how people will react, how people will view us. The moment you make a stand for your ethnicity, all of a sudden you're pushed to one side as the troublemaker. You know, the moment you're quite passionate about how you feel, you're seen as the aggressor or the difficult staff. So nobody really wants that label. And once you have that places where you have grievance processes are not really a safe place. You know, you're having a grievance process where the managers have been working at the company long before you got employed. And you're asking them to review a case on someone that no longer than they've known you. And the person looks like them, you don't look like them. You know, you already face an uphill task in that. And then you're wondering how your life will be in that place when the grievance case falls through, or even if you succeed. So there's so many things to think about that it makes you think, you know what, it's not going to kill me, I must just ignore it. And the more we ignore it is why we are here today in this situation where we have a lot of people in a position, but, you know, and they're not in a position of influence. And it's trying to see how we can change that construct and try and think about how we can empower people, empower the systems, you know, to improve visibility. I want to say visibility and representation. I think people need to understand that there's a difference between race and ethnicity. You know, you could be race Black, but you might not be ethnically Black. They're two different things. You know, so it's understanding that. Just the same way you can't say someone's personality is the same as their character. You know, personality and characters are different. I think there has to be what they refer to as intercultural awareness. People understanding your culture and you understanding their culture. You know, trying to avoid a situation where people turn their perception or their experience into the perception of a whole ethnic group. You know, and trying to see how you could actually make sure that when you have disciplinary panels or recruitment panels, you have heterogeneity on the panel. You know, you need to have that on the panel. You need to have a sense of, I can connect this person. One of the examples I often use is the whole Black Panther movement and Barack Obama movement, where yes, we all know everyone can become the president of America, but we've never seen a Black man become the president of America. So you can keep dreaming on, but you don't have an image in your mind of what that would look like. So your inspiration, yes, comes from Reagan, comes from the Bush and everybody else, but there's a different inspiration that comes when you see Obama as a president. You know, you can watch as many hero movies as you like and wear as many Spider-Man and Captain American jerseys that you want, but it's different when you see a Black Panther. So it's important. It's not, we're not saying every mentor and everybody should be Black, but yes, there needs to be a proper representation because there is a mentoring that requires a lookalike as well as a non-lookalike. You know, so you don't have to be Black to mentor a Black person. Most of my mentors, I've never had a Black mentor. All my mentors are either white or Asians. So it's not that in itself, but it's understanding the importance of having that representation and having that diversity and heterogeneity across the board.
Okay, thank you, Charles. You pretty much said it all. So yeah, and this leads me on to my final question, and I need it to be brief. And you know, if all our panel members can contribute, I would really appreciate it. If you can't, no problem at all. And the final question is, as a profession, how do we become culturally competent? And please just keep it even less than 2 minutes if possible. So please, I leave the floor for any of my panel members.
Do you want me to take that? I would launch in that since I was the last person to speak. I think again, we got, I thought about it over the last couple of days, and I think one of the most important things what the panel have said so far, we need to be more open about having this conversation. And I think we need to take away the stigma of someone feeling, if you act a certain way, you're racist. A lot of people have racial bias. It's a common thing that we know. So we need to accept it. There's a racial bias. It doesn't automatically mean you're racist. I think another to think about, which I really feel strongly about, is the 10-man principle. So the 10-man principle is a principle that the Israelis created, where you always have someone that has a contrarian thinking, someone that thinks about the opposite side of things. So being the devil advocate in every meeting, in every leadership panel, there has to be somebody that stands against what the group thinking is. what the conformity is. I think doing that is very important. I think another thing is also ensuring that everyone in leadership and in the HR department has face-to-face implicit bias training. I think that is very essential. I think if they can achieve those three things, I think there'll be definitely a change in cultural awareness and competence.
And make the profession culturally competent overall, you could say. Would any of our panel members like to add to it just briefly before we bring this discussion to a close?
Yeah, so Martin, I completely agree with everything that Charles has said. And I think it also is back into this thing of actually what are our inner barriers as Black people and Black pharmacists in stopping us from moving forward, and in order to support the profession in being culturally competent, we also need to reflect within ourselves about what's stopping us. So Charles, your example of people who say, I don't want to be area manager because it's the same money, etc. We need to challenge ourselves as to why are we holding ourselves back. And whether and it's a thing that, you know, even as women, so Louise and I, for example, as Black female pharmacists, we're at that intersection where actually you've got both those things. And you know, being a woman in a world run by men, as well as being Black. So it's actually understanding our own inner motivations and drivers in order to challenge. There's also, I also think that there's something around the governance structures. So as we move into more senior positions, but even if we're not in a senior position, for example, somebody like Noah, who actually, with your activism, you are actually an influencer. There's something about challenging and speaking truth to power. And saying, actually, these governance structures, these systems need to be in place. So the sorts of things that you were saying, Charles, about his recruitment practices, etc. One of the things that I know that I've always done is, regardless of colour, actually, recruitment is the most important thing. So it has to be open, honest, transparent. And it needs to be the same for everybody. That doesn't really matter. And if you have that system, it means that you're much less likely to then to have people who are discriminated against because of their skin color or because of their backgrounds. However, we do also need to recognize and see color. In order to be culturally competent, we've got to be able to say it's okay that people are different. And it's not that we're ignoring everybody. We just need to treat everybody fairly, which means understanding what the differences are. So before I worked at Barts, I worked at King's College Hospital in South East London. Now, moving to Barts, where we have a very large South Asian population, I previously did not have to consider the impact of Eid on our services. In actual, so it was all about Christmas. It was all about Christmas. And if people, where you worked before, if you were to celebrate Eid, it was fine. But actually, working in North East London, in actual fact, you have to actually consider that as how are you going to allow a large proportion of your staff to have time off in order for them to celebrate Eid. And why would you have a whole system set in place for Christmas but not for Eid? When in actual fact, with our population, with our staff, it's safe. So understanding that what's important and saying, oh, actually, we do need to talk about it. So some of our hospitals, we treat the period of the Eid the same way that we used to treat Christmas, in terms of letting people have the time off, which which I previously never had to consider. So it's actually saying that in actual fact, we need to understand this, we need to see the difference, and we need to be okay with saying, actually, this is this is something that we need to take. It's as important as all of the other stuff. It's not differently important, it's just as important. And seeing that difference and trying to understand it, and we have some responsibility of putting our hands up and saying, no, actually, this is important. And I need to educate you on why this is important. And I'm just going to call out very briefly, for example, with the fellows dinner, which for quite a few years was held during Ramadan.
Mm.
Mm.
And this was highlighted several times to the society.
Mm.
And it was just not seen as important until somebody started to really kick off. And in order for the profession to be culturally competent and culturally aware, it actually they need to accept that it is important.
Yes.
We're not just telling you because we like to talk about our culture. We're telling you because in actual fact, it's important and you have to change your ways. And that's for people who are in a position of influence to call it out and to make a fuss about it, and to say no, and to not be demotivated when people are ignored.
Yeah.
I mean, Louise, did you want to add to that? Or?
Yeah, just a couple of really small points. Yeah, briefly, just in terms of, it's just amazing listening to what everybody has to say. I feel so inspired, but a couple of quick things I would say. If you're in a position of leadership, understand that having diversity in your team, in any meeting, in any recruitment, in anything, it's not a nice to have, it's how it should be. And also understand that you value that. There's quite a bit of research in the US which basically says the more the diverse the team that you have in terms of educational background, experiences, gender, etc., every point of intersection, the better the product that you're going to get. The more innovative the ideas, the more focused the work that you will produce, the more efficient you can work as a team. So actually don't see a diversity as like a tick box. See it actually as something that if you're a high performing team or a high performing organization, it's something that you need. And then my other bit would just be advice to just Black pharmacists who are trying to make it in general is understand, be demanding for yourself, first of all, be demanding of yourself, your career, what you want to achieve. Don't ever think that some door should be closed to you, because that's not how it is. Yesterday, I just did online teaching for our first year students with myself and another pharmacist from within my team, Ade. And I realized those students had probably never had a classroom situation with 2 Black teachers in it. They probably never had that ever in their lives. I never had it. And I had a little moment with myself thinking, wow, this is amazing. And when I first met Ade years ago, he was just a casual pharmacist coming in, doing a little bit of teaching here and there. He works for Day Lewis, and he's made it through. And now he's got a part-time full-on position with us at UCL. And it's brilliant. So be demanding for yourself, and also realize that sometimes to get ahead, relationships are important. So if you meet someone and they seem interesting, talk to them, engage with them. And if you don't see anybody that looks like you in the field that you want to do, seek them out. We're lucky now we have social media, so you can kind of hunt people down, go on a website, find out who they are. Sometimes people just email me and say, how do I start in university? Do I have to have a PhD? What does it mean? You know, people just email me with random questions, and feel that you can do that. So be demanding kind of for yourself. Thanks, Martin.
If I could just
I want to add no into it because it won't be fair. So no, if you could, please just make it really.
Yes, thank you. If I could just leave perhaps the panel and the viewers something to ponder on the subject of diversity and why diversity is important. I think luckily for people down south, you're a lot more diverse than we are here in the north. If I'm completely honest, I'd only ever seen 2 or known of 2 Black pharmacists up until I joined the UK BPA. So why is diversity important? Well, improved diversity amongst any group leads to the diffusion of experience, opinions, identity, resulting in a collective shared identity, which then births and promotes cohesion, and lastly, dilutes ignorance. Okay, now I say dilutes ignorance because ignorance will never fully be expelled, because sometimes people just don't want to listen. But I think a greater number of people want to listen, but they've just never had that opportunity. If I can leave you with a brief story, I worked with a colleague over in Manchester who lived in an area quite close to my own area is known for being, it's infamous for being racist, but she lived a few minutes away, and she swears to her life she'd never experienced racism, and she was a white lady. And to me, that was quite, wow, alarming. So I spoke to her, and through our conversation, I realized that she didn't understand what racism was because she'd never known what racism is or how it's classified. So because she didn't, but once I explained my experiences, or once I explained what could seem as racially charged to me, she then begin to understand. And then when she spoke to her grandmother actually sort of said, actually, yeah, well, look, if that's what racism is, then when I was a child, I probably would have been classed as racist. So that's another thing why diversity is important. So if we can do anything is promote diversity, because a shared identity is the only thing that's going to propel this profession. Like Louise said, once you have diversity amongst any group, you have different minds thinking a different way, and you'll reach your goal a lot faster. So thank you all for having me.
No problem. And pretty much what I've taken from everything and from each individual panel members have said is, I think education, helping staff members as well as ourselves and people around us to be culturally aware, and most importantly, having those difficult questions. The world's changing now in more ways than one, and I believe it's important that we all start to move into the right direction. If we don't, then we're going to have one person going left, right, up, down, and it's just going to fall apart. So once again, I'd like to thank my panel members for coming on here today. It's been very informative. It's been very interesting, and I feel privileged and it's an honor to be around such wonderful pharmacists as yourself, whether you're at the top of your career or at the bottom. Honestly, it has been an honor. So thank you. I'm going to pass you on to Amandeep just to close the meeting. Once again, I thank you guys, and it has been really good.
Thank you, Martin. That was incredible to listen to. And a lot of the things are things that we know and we need to do something about now. And the RPS is definitely wanting to change things for the future and also reflect on itself. We need to hold ourselves up to a high standard if we're going to be calling out other organizations. So we definitely need to put ourselves through this as well. So thank you. And I just wanted to kind of finish off just by saying that we've got an event next week, and I'm glad you mentioned Allyship Rally App, because that's next week's focus and the importance of allyship. It's not up to Black pharmacists and pharmacy team members to do this. We need the support from our white counterparts in helping us. So that allyship piece, and also it's got an intersectional feel. So it's an all-female panel, so it is about the gender and race element with allyship. So please do join us next week. And we've also got an event next Wednesday with UK BPA again, looking at discrimination in the workplace, problems with visa statuses and fitness to practice. So that's an evening event. So if you would like to attend, you need to register on our website. And then we have also launching a social media campaign today of highlighting inspiring Black pharmacists. So one of the things when we're putting our panels together was that there's loads of people we want to invite, but we can't because of how many faces can fit on Zoom and space and time. So if you know of Black pharmacists and pharmacy team members that inspire you every day and you think they're doing incredible work, please do tag them in our social media posts. And that way we can celebrate people and give people a platform that tend to not be given one. So thank you again. I'll end it there and I'll let people carry on with their days.